stuff. We'll do the take one. So welcome everybody to week four of Soul Talks. This is wonderful. I can't believe we're at week 4 already. And for those of you who have just joined us, thank you for tuning in. For those of you that are watching this on demand, welcome to you as well. We will go over one last bit of housekeeping. MJ and I are gonna chat, and then when it is time to open it up, you can turn on your mic, you can raise your hand, you can turn on your camera, you can send a question through the chat, and feel free to send stuff as we go along and we'll address it at the end. Now I will do my official welcome to my special guest today on Soul Talks, MJ Shaw, who is also my partner with Soul Talks and is also the owner of Soul Fuel. And I assume most of you who are on watching us live know that. So welcome, MJ.
Thanks. This is so strange to be introduced, but I'm into it.
So formal. So I will tell you a little bit about how we've been doing this, even though you know how we've been doing it because you've watched all the other ones and participated live last week. We do something called the Fresh in 5 questionnaire, where I'm going to fire 5 questions out at you and we'll banter a little bit back and forth. And today's session is a little bit unique because it sort of came up as a request because you and so many of your clients and attendees at Soul Fuel and people who you've crossed paths with, you've always been very open about your story and how you came to be a mother. So it was a request to sort of learn more about fertility, infertility, endometriosis, which is something that makes us soul sisters. And so we're just going to kind of hear a bit more about you and your journey to that, and then get to some questions that people may have about their own experience, or just to sort of open air vent about how hard all of this is, regardless of your story. So welcome. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to start with question number 1, which is really just going to be a bit of a bio for you. You know, we chatted when we first met and realized we had so much in common. Your story on becoming a mother is very complex. And if you could summarize it, more than an elevator speech, but, you know, not Jane Fonda's biography.
Yeah, the happy medium.
Yeah, let us know a little bit about how that happened for you.
So I always wanted to be a mother. I would have, you know, had time been on my side and life circumstance on my side, I probably would have had 2 or 3 kids. I come from a very big extended family. I'm the oldest of 18 cousins, and I did lots of nannying and babysitting growing up. So that was never a question. I just, as with many of us, were, you know, in a situation where time lags and the biological clock is ticking. Life just didn't line up. I had a lot of heartbreak with relationships. I had a lot of abusive relationships. Thank God I don't have a child with any of those people. And I didn't meet my husband until my late 30s. So I would have done it on my own had I not met him. I was actually in the process of getting my eggs, freezing my eggs when I met him. And it was a very early conversation in our relationship as a result. I think I told him, you know, I was like, we were walking down the street. It was like our 3rd date. I was like, so I'm going to an appointment tomorrow to freeze my eggs. And he was like,
hello.
And then he sort of like dabbled with that. And then we got back to his apartment. He was like, so can we just talk about the omelet, the human omelet
what's
situation?
Going on here? What's my
So, you know, we entered into that sort of stage of a relationship quite early because I was older and I was really serious about having kids. And also because I had endometriosis and I'd had 2 surgeries for endometriosis. So I anticipated there being issues with getting pregnant. And it turns out there was not issues with getting pregnant. There was issues with staying pregnant. So, and really, when I look now that I know sort of the science behind it a little bit more, it was just my age. And because I was testing so regularly, a lot of people have what's called chemical chemical pregnancies sort of between that 5 and 6 week mark and never know about it. They just get a period. Right. Yeah. But I was testing and I was always in it. So I had one later miscarriage so we had a few things that were some challenges, some obstacles. First of all, so my age, once we started, I was 38.
Geriatric is what they
I
call it,
know.
MJ. You're
It's really
geriatric.
Geriatric, as I jump around teaching a million classes, feeling very geriatric.
Yeah.
And also our situation, so me and my husband were long distance for 5 years. So we got married and then he was off to the Middle East. So it's really hard to get pregnant from the Middle East.
Yeah, virtual.
Virtual pregnancy. So we had 2 weeks within that first deployment that we met in Europe, and I had lined it all up, the timing of being in Europe up to ovulation, like I was in it. And I did get pregnant, and I stayed pregnant for 9 weeks. And then I miscarried on my 38th birthday.
Oh, it's
so I was in the hospital on my 38th birthday, and that's a whole other situation. And then I got pregnant a few other times, but I didn't miscarry properly. So that was part of a thing that happened.
Miscarriage or a missed abortion. I know some people that have had it too, and
yeah, I feel like that's like
we could do that. That's a whole other topic.
Yes, and I'm certainly happy to answer the questions about it, but I was like, now we're in a stage where we really just need to take this we need to take this to a higher level and get to the fertility clinic. And so once we did that, the ball started to roll pretty quickly. They were like, yes, you check off all the boxes. And so we started the process of IVF and all the fertility treatments. And again, I would say that was another few years, another year and a half. And then I went through the process again recently this last year. So we have one beautiful baby boy out of the whole thing. And I would go through it 100 times over again to have him. So it was worth it. It was worth every bit of it.
Wow.
So that's the abbreviated story.
That's the abbreviated story, and I'm curious to know, and we'll probably delve into it a little bit more about when we talk about the cost. And I'm curious to know about what that year. You said it was about a year and a half. Is that right? From the start of testing to baby
cycle
in arms,
monitoring,
or to pregnancy?
To pregnancy.
To pregnancy. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, that's something to be honest. So, and you got diagnosed with endometriosis during this process or well before?
No, well before. I'd had 2 surgeries before.
Okay. So that's the same as me. And were you told, how old were you when you got diagnosed with endo?
Early 30s. When I was diagnosed, but I'd had it for sure for years. Just
were you told that you couldn't have babies when you got diagnosed?
Nope. Nope, I was not.
Was that ever given to you as it was going to cause problems? Did you ever?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, this is, it can cause fertility issues. So
see, because I have the total opposite story. I was diagnosed with endo when I was 19. I had to drop out of university. I had very complicated endometriosis, but I was told when I had that first surgery that I was sterile and I would never have a baby ever. And so that was just sort of my, that was my card and my, on dates. And so when I met my husband, I was like, well, here's what you need to know about me. I'm useless to you. And he was fine with that. And we've built our life around no babies. And then at 40,
surprise,
why don't I feel well?
Yeah,
what's happening?
Right.
So, it's a tricky thing. And endometriosis leads to all sorts of complications. There's so much misinformation. There's so little support for women. Infertility is a complicated part of endometriosis. It's not everything, but it's a complicated part. But it sort of leads into the next question for me, because there's this saying, you're a mother born or a mother made. I grew up knowing I would never be a mother. So I don't know if that fueled it. I never had any real desire to be a mother. No offense, Luke, I love you much. But it just was not on my radar. It was just not the way I structured my life. And I was very mothering to my nephews and to my friends and to my partner and to myself, hopefully, usually last. But I have so many friends like you who they knew they wanted to be a mom. That was your destiny. What what do you think drove you to that? Like, what do you think drove you to, like, I'm going to do a year and a half of intense fertility treatments because I am determined to be a mother. I will do it on my own if I have to. That's a big thing.
I don't know. I think, you know, some people know all along they want to be mothers, some people don't. I would say in terms of fertility treatments, I think you really have to want it. Otherwise, you're going to be really resentful because there will be roadblocks along the way, and financial roadblocks, physical roadblocks, psychological roadblocks. There's going to be mistakes. So you really have to want to be a mother. I think by the time you reach the stage where you're like at the clinic, everybody wants to be a mom. That's, yeah.
Do you think there's, and we're gonna,
or a dad for that sake, because you know there's men involved as well.
Of course, and this is sort of, you know, we get into some pretty heated, complicated topics here on Soul Talks. Do you think that a lot of the drive, not necessarily you specifically, but do you think that there is this drive, like, that if you don't become a mother because we're women, that it's something that you have to do? Do you think that there is this, especially if you are told that you can't, or it's not easy, that there's almost this internal drive to, like, I'm gonna fucking do this. Screw you, my body was made for this. Like, just opening up that dialogue, or was it something more spiritual, more, you know, personal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly. I think it's really personal. I mean, there's been people have had relationships where it's the guy that really wants the kid, not the woman. So that, I think, is like.
But you just knew. You always knew growing up.
Always knew. Knew. And in fact, I was in a relationship where I was really pushing for it previously, and thank goodness that didn't work out. I had a child with the person I should have had a child with.
That's right.
I really knew all along that I wanted a kid. So.
See, when I found out I was pregnant on St. Patrick's Day, 2 pints in, and I was like, I don't feel well. Like, there's something wrong. I think I should take a test. And Chris was like, well, don't do it tonight. Do it in the morning. And I got up at 4:30, took it, threw up, burst into tears, and then sat against the fridge going, holy fuck, how did this happen? So, you know.
Totally.
But
you would not have been going to the fertility clinic, for example.
No, but you know what? And back to this, so it's a good lead in, because I do want to talk about the fertility clinic and all of that that's around that, because I think a lot of people have questions about that, whether I have a lot of friends that had, one baby, sort of nature's way, but they are desperate for a second, and they just can't get pregnant with the second, and they're contemplated going in vitro and different fertility methods. I was my endometriosis doctor was the top endo specialist in Canada, named Dr. Kai Lee, who has since retired. But he
gave me my first surgery.
Oh, yes, he's a genius. He was a surgical genius. But he was part of a very high-end fertility clinic in Toronto at Bay Street, and I was always in there with so many women looking just desperate and sad and sitting with their husbands, and I would see number crunching and trying to figure out how the hell they were going to do this. Can you talk a bit about that year and a half long process? I've heard, I don't know anything about it, I've heard it's exceptionally expensive. It's often not covered. Can you delve into that?
I sort of entered into it at a really good time, because the province started covering 1 round of IVF. So you just, and at the time I was really at the outset of that coverage. Now there's waiting lists. But I was, and I had to move clinics because I got pregnant again and then miscarried again. And so I got off the waiting list at one clinic, but my fertility doctor moved me up north to another clinic. So it's each clinic gets a certain number of provincially funded rounds of IVF. And so it's a matter of qualifying. There's a bunch of ticked boxes based on your age, your viability. If you have endometriosis, that clicks off a box. If you're in a same-sex marriage, that checks off a box. So it's provided based on as many your boxes being checked off.
Right. No pun intended.
And
you owe me a Coke.
Thank you for that. And so we did qualify, and so that covered 1 round of IVF. And the drugs aren't covered. And then we also did genetic testing for a variety of reasons, and those weren't covered. So the drugs, I had this great health plan with ACTRA. So I want to say like 80 or 90% of my drugs were covered. And so had I just done the pure IVF, one round of IVF plus the drugs, it wouldn't have cost me that much at all because I did qualify for the funding.
And if it doesn't, what does it normally cost? Do you know?
It's about 10 to 15,000 for one round of IVF.
And is one round one egg, one shot, or is it 5?
No. So the way IVF works is you take drugs to stimulate your ovaries. And so they figure this out. They do your blood tests. They do a bunch of things. It's the same way as you would do to freeze your eggs, or as you would do for surrogacy. So this process of egg retrieval, of egg growth and egg retrieval, is the same for a bunch of fertility treatments. So you do a few days of putting some needles in your belly and taking some hormones, and your ovaries grow. So instead of ovulating one egg per month, which is what you typically do, sometimes you ovulate 2, that's how twins happen, you're going to fill up. So I had 20 eggs, for example, in my egg retrieval, and then they go in and they pull out all those eggs, and then they either freeze them
surgically. Sorry to interrupt, I really know nothing, but do they go in like through through like a laparoscopy, or do they go
like that? They go vaginally, and then they puncture through the vaginal wall on each side to get into both eggs.
Are you awake?
So you are. It's the most unpleasant part of the whole process.
It sounds very unpleasant.
But you know what? We can talk about that because I feel like there's.
Wow.
It wasn't
hard.
You are drugs, so you can. There is drugs, there's pain relief being done. And again, it's very short. The whole thing was like 10 minutes.
Okay.
So in the whole scheme of things.
And then they freeze them.
Then if you have a partner who has sperm, or you have a sperm donor, then they pair them up.
He gets a magazine, he goes into a closet.
That's correct. Or takes in the U-porn. I know. I'd be like going in there to get blood taken, jabbed away. All the things. He'd be like, I'm just gonna watch anyway. The whole thing is totally unjust. But you, so then they pair them up, and then I call it the countdown. So they see how many of them are going to turn into blastocysts. So like I had 20 eggs to start off. So they put them all together. Then you get a call every second day. They're like, okay, so it's down to 15. Okay, so it's down to 10. Okay, so it's down to 8. You're kind of wondering each day. You're like, okay, so how many are going to turn into blastocysts? Blastocyst meaning a viable embryo, very light. Right. And so I had 5 blastocysts, which for my age, I had a high reserve of eggs. I had a few things on my side, but I ended up having 5. Now, I had a friend that had a low reserve. She ended up getting 5 eggs, but all of them turned into blastocysts. So at the end of the day, I had 20, she had 5. We both had the same amount left over.
Right. It's like crapshoot. It's like you don't know what you're going to get.
Well, and at the end of the day, I was at a certain age, and this is totally statistic. So out of 100% of your eggs, 75% aren't viable pregnancies, or they're not the good eggs anymore. Right. So then we got those 5 genetically tested, which cost $5,000. And out of those 5, 3 were viable. So the first one had Down syndrome. The next 3 were good, and the last one was genetically, there was problems with it. So we kept those 3, and we kept those 3. So genetic testing is bananas. They take a tiny little sample and they send it off to the US. The clinics are all in the US. And then they test for 400 different diseases. They can also, in the US, you can pay for the information. In Canada, it's illegal. But in the US, you can find out the gender of the baby. You can find out eye color, hair color. They call it super babying. So that before it even goes inside you, you can decide, which I think is bananas.
I think I had genetic testing light, but it was already like, I was already at 18 weeks, 20 weeks. So this is pre.
This is like, it's just a little tiny embryo in a petri dish, and they take a sample of that embryo, of all the embryos, and send them. And then it comes back and they grade the embryos. And so they encourage you to start with, the strongest graded embryo first. So So then we did that. So
and they implant it, turkey baster, your legs are in the air.
It's a little fancier than that. All these clinics, they're doing they're doing very well. So it's like a spa treatment. You go in and they give you like a warm blanket and a juice. And you know, I paid to have like an acupuncturist come in and give me some needles to relax me, and like it's nice. There's a whole thing. And that process, the embryo transfer process is actually really easy. It's easier than like a pap smear. But if you're like me, you just cry the whole time because I would have. This like door opens up in the wall and they're like, and if you have a partner, your partner's there, please say your name, date of birth, so they don't get the wrong one. Yeah. And then they have a little stick. It's the weirdest thing. It looks like this, like sort of like a straw, and they walk really, really carefully. And you're like, is my future baby on the end of that straw?
Don't drop it.
And they walk, totally. Everybody's like, and oh my God. And you watch them put it up, and it's all on a screen, and you see it, and you watch them put it in, and then you lie there to just like hang out for like 5 minutes, and then you leave, and you do this.
And how long do you have to wait to find out if it took?
2 weeks. And then, you're doing a lot of, we can talk about the drugs and all the rest, and you're doing all sorts of stuff in between and to prepare and during that time to amp up the chances of it working.
And so you have to wait 2 weeks, and then you go back and you have a test and they say, yes, it's taken, or you take a pregnancy test?
I mean, they tell you not to take home pregnancy tests.
How many did you take?
But I did every single time. So
I have to pee again. I knew that's expensive in itself. They're like the good quality ones. Like when we found out, I got the cheap one because I was like, I can't have a baby. This is a mistake. And so we're like, it's probably because it was no name. And so we got the clear blue, which was fancy pants, but it was like $70.
We our first embryo transfer, we were in Europe. Like right afterwards, I was in Europe for a wedding, and we were in oh my God, where were we? Slovakia. We were doing some travel. Anyway, we were in like a really small. I'm gonna remember. Anyway, small Eastern European country, and I went to go get the pregnancy test, and it was called The Woman's Secret. That was the name of the pregnancy test. We died. I have pictures of it. The Woman's Secret.
Oh, we got to see if we can find a photo of that box online and put that up as our follow-up. That's crazy. Yeah. And so you said your first. So how many of these did you have before Samuel?
So I'd one before that. The first one, it didn't work, and it should have worked, and we were really confused. So this is the other thing, is I'll talk about advocating for yourself at clinics. Because of my endometriosis, we had spoken about a procedure that I would need to get done, which is Lupron treatment for 3 months in order to pull down, because you're being given so much estrogen that it can conflict. It can actually grow bad cells as well. So we discussed at the very beginning, you're supposed to go on this Lupron treatment, 3 months to like really get rid of all the endo, and then we'll build up, like hard build up a lot of estrogen in your lining, and then we'll implant. And we just went ahead after the egg retrieval. They were just like, okay, so let's book the appointment to put in the first blastocyst. We were like, of course they know what they're talking about. We're gonna do it. They forgot to do that part of the treatment.
Right.
And I realized it like a few days after it didn't take. And I'm at home and I'm like, remember, and I'm going back on the notes. And so it was a screw up. It was a total medical screw up that my doctor acknowledged and apologized for, but that had been 4 months of hormone treatments to get me like up, and procedures to get me up to that point. And it was all for naught. And so then I had to start again.
And then did you do the Lupron the second time?
I did the Lupron the second time, and we have Samuel.
Okay. So you did it twice.
The first time I didn't do the Lupron treatment.
No, but you did IVF twice.
Yes. No, I did egg transfer. So I only did one round of IVF. And my first round of IVF, I had 3 viable embryos. Right. So I put in the first one. That one is the one that there was a complication. The second one, Samuel. And the third one, which was the least, like it was a low graded embryo, was what I worked on this past year. I did another 4 months of hormone treatments to put the embryo in this past January. So January of 2020, and it didn't work. So
sorry to hear that.
We're out of embryos.
So you've got a miracle baby. You've got one amazing miracle baby.
Yeah. And we would have gone in for another round, but then COVID happened. Right. All the clinics were shut down. And by the time they opened up and I started going back in June, I started briefly going back. My doctor ended up leaving and going away. And I was like, okay. So I went to another clinic, which is like way busier. And I just literally, I was like, I can't do this again. And at my age, 42.
I was just gonna ask, you're 42. Yeah, it's got some.
They were like
risks.
The chances of me getting pregnant through IVF were like 5 to 10%, maybe. And then the chances of me getting I started IUI were like 3 to 5%, whereas the chance of me getting pregnant naturally is like 3 to 5 is like 3%. So I was like, I'm just
and the complications that can come because of it. There's all sorts of Down syndrome, obviously being one of them. There is, this. I don't recognize names on there, but we have a son who has autism. There is a bit of a link. They're thinking potentially in having children later who can have neurological profiles, neurodiverse profiles that can make life a little trickier. So it's a big decision to decide to do. Good sort of lead into my next question, which is, and I'm sort of coming at it myself from the endometriosis angle, but talk to me about like, what is your body feeling like? What's it feeling like now? What are do you have any lingering issues that you found, having a baby? Is your body, I mean, you're super healthy, you're misfit pop, woo. But did the drugs cause any problems? I do know some women that had complications with Lupron. Lupron is actually used to treat very aggressive endometriosis and cancer, and people can have lots of immune problems after. Anything that happened with your situation that you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, now that I'm off it, so this is the longest time. So I've been in the process of getting pregnant, of either doing Chinese therapies or fertility treatments, or getting pregnant and miscarrying, and then so this has been 4 years. So in June, when I was like, and I started on the drugs, more the appointments, I've probably been to the fertility clinic, like in the last 4 years, like 500-600 times. And so I was just, and this is where it was different for me, where expense was different. All the appointments are in the morning, which is fine for anybody that works 9 to 5. I work mornings. That's how I make my bread and butter. I work hourly. And so the amount of money that it cost me to cancel clients, cancel classes, move things around, that's where the stress was.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Because it's exhausting, and I had to drive 45 minutes. My clinic was up at Yonge and Finch. So as I started to do that again, I was like, I don't want to do this again. And so I finished it in June. Basically, I have been hormone free since June.
Woo!
Amazing. Yeah. So I would say
you're like, there's a pandemic. I'm good.
Yeah. It was like, I didn't know I was in pain. Like when I had endometriosis for years, and then they diagnosed me and they did a surgery like very quickly. And after I recovered from the surgery, I was like, whew, like you kind of don't know how bad it was until it's not, until you're in a different space. But I was really focused, as with most things. It's like, you have side effects, you have fatigue, there's moodiness, you're putting hormones into your body. I mean, I put 360 needles in my bum over those years. So my rear was always just like one big massive bruise. But I was really clear on the outcome, and really determined. So in the best way possible, I just sucked it up. Because
you're a mother born. You're meant to do this.
I just was like, and I would say I had a longer road than some. Some people have a longer road than I did. So for the short-term pain and the like long-term gain, I really, really believe it was worth it. It was worth it for me. And if it hadn't worked with Samuel, and if it hadn't worked on that other round, like we were looking down the surrogacy road, we were looking down the adoption road, like we would have found a way to have a family.
Right. That you did.
Yeah.
And that's a good last question before I turn it over to questions that people may have. What advice, like, you know, here's your elevator speech. What advice would you give to people who are like, especially after hearing that story or hearing snippets of other people's complicated stories? What's the advice if someone's like, I really want to be a mother, I really want to do this, I really want to have a family, but I'm terrified of all of this? What's the advice?
Of this? Well, I think you have to, first of all, really know your limitations, like know how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to spend. Because I really believe, this is my big piece of advice, is that you have to figure out how to go through this and still live your life. Yeah. I've seen a lot of women put everything on hold, quit their jobs, stop working out, stop going out. And it just doesn't help. Like, it doesn't help the process, and it certainly doesn't help your life. Yeah. So I think that's a big thing, is knowing your personal limitations. And there's also other, you know, adoption is also an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just throw that out as a possibility. But the biggest thing is that when I'm sort of like coaching people through some of this stuff is know the things you can control, and then let go of the things you can't. Because, you know, we're so used to, most of us, high performance women, like, if I put out this effort, this is going to be the outcome. If I set out this plan, this is going to be the outcome. And Mother Nature just doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way. No, absolutely. I think
there's things you can control, like you can control your lifestyle. So there is research that minimizing alcohol consumption or eliminating it completely helps your fertility. The foods you eat, eating a really healthy, you know, a vegetarian or veggie strong diet. I had my Chinese medicine doctor had me on lamb and raspberries at one point. I mean, I don't know if that helped, but I did it. And that was as I got into my round with Samuel. Sleep, exercise definitely helps. What else do I have down here? Oh, and you can also control what you communicate to people. So you don't have to tell anybody anything. Or if you know you're somebody like me, where if I'm holding information, it makes me feel more stressed out. But I knew that I would be telling people openly, and then potentially also be telling them that I'd miscarried, or that it didn't work out. And some people have a hard time with that, but I was like, this is my communication comfort level. So, but if you know that it's going to make it harder on you to have to talk about it, then just
protect yourself.
It's your business. It's your decision on what you communicate. And then the things that you can't control is fundamentally whether or not you're going to have a viable pregnancy. People, you know, there's so many things. I see so many things being sold out there, like line up the crystals this way, meditate this way, put out positive vibration sequence. Like, I could not have put out more good intention on every single one of my tries. Like, I could not have wanted it more each time. And that didn't measure up as to whether or not it would work. Right. I remember my third miscarriage, somebody said, I just think you're being a bit negative. Maybe that's why it's not working. And I wanted to throttle them. I was like, there's lots of blame about, we're very quick to blame. Maybe you're too stressed out. Maybe you're not eating well enough. Maybe you're this, maybe that, putting the blame on the woman for the process that is so hard. Yeah. So you have to be really careful not to take that on. There's only so much you can control, and the rest is up to the gods and
the life that you're gonna have. Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that, you know, from someone who I have, you know, the majority of my friends have had at the time. I now am in a different club, but at the time that I found out I was pregnant, we had no friends with kids. We had sort of carved out a life with couples who were childless, either by choice or childless by happenstance. And you know, so I had a lot of women friends who wanted to talk about that. They hadn't met the right person. I think one of the things is that being okay on either end, I would think, as someone who hasn't gone down this path, but knowing that you've got some things on the one green pasture, and then so that you're okay on either side would be something that I would think. Anyway,
well, and that's sort of what I have contended with this last round. I really had to think about what path I wanted to go down. And I really wanted another child. I still do. If I got pregnant tomorrow, I'd be thrilled.
You can borrow mine. You could probably, I'll long-term lease him to you if you'd like.
Looks like, how did I end up in this weird lady's house? Okay, well, we'll follow up on that.
Yeah.
Which is sort of where we're at now. And by this time next year, things have gotten so complicated with everything happening in the world. And I feel like my plate is very full. But if it becomes, we are going to look into adoption. That is something we're really strongly considering, because we want a bigger family.
Yeah,
so
that's lovely. And I know some women that did it when their kids were teenagers, and at 50 they decided to adopt them. So you know what? You never know. It's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
That character.
I'm gonna open up. I see a couple questions here. It's a really fascinating story. We could talk forever. And it's fascinating for me because I don't know that much about that side of the process. I know this side of the process of like, holy fuck, what happened? So I'm going to just check our chat here. Oh, that was at the beginning. This is all good news for the perimenopause sticker hair goal. Yes, we were talking about perimenopause before we started. And there's a whole SoulTalks on perimenopause. If you would like to get that recording, you can let us know. And that's it. That's come up in the chat. So I'm going to open it up to, we have a couple of people who are on live. If you have something that you would like to ask, feel free to chat. Feel free to open up your camera. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. And then otherwise, I'll turn it over to MJ, because I think you had something.
Well, I had a client who's getting she's getting an egg retrieval process done right this moment. So she sent me in a bunch of questions. And one of her, I mean, when I look at all these questions, it's just like, it's so fascinating, because you really do start to question everything you're doing. So someone told me that you shouldn't stretch your uterus, arms over your head. Is that true? I mean,
no, I think you're all right.
Line up Crystal X, right? Like people have been getting pregnant for years, running fields, and this is the other thing, because I exercised through all of it. So, and there is I can answer some questions around exercise and fertility treatments. So there's you can exercise the whole time you're trying to get pregnant. Mm-hmm. You can exercise while you're pregnant. There's like windows before during your treatment where you should not exercise. And so if you're getting IVF done, as you're taking the drugs and your eggs are, your ovaries are expanding, you don't want to be jumping around, because your eggs could twist, your ovaries could twist. And very, very painful, and it can be damaging to the eggs. So during that cycle, we're about a week leading up, 5 to 7 days, where you're putting the needles in and where your ovaries are growing, you don't want to exercise then. Then you get the procedure done, you get the surgery done, and it takes a little time for the eggs to go back. Or some people get the procedure done right away or quickly afterwards. So about 5 days after the procedure. So there's a good 10 days in there where you just don't want to do anything. It's like any surgical procedure. You just don't want to exercise. But after that and before that, exercise is very helpful. It's really helpful for stress release. It's just been proven that circulation helps.
Yeah.
Circulation helps during pregnancy for the baby. Getting blood flow going into all those body parts is really key.
There's really nothing bad you could say about exercise.
No. And it also just helps you get your mind off it. and live your life and feel like you're not making that sacrifice. Like, oh, this is another thing I'm giving up. I'm giving up alcohol. I'm giving up this. I'm spending this money, like it can be very easy to go down the resentment trail.
Yeah.
And so you want to allow yourself the ability to properly live your life, and exercise is part of that. So,
yeah. Okay. So just a thank you from one of the viewers saying, thank you for being so open and for sharing. So far, no other questions coming there. Did your person who's having the transfer have any other questions?
She sure does. She gave me a whole list. What kind of exercise can I do? Can I do the same day? So no, I would not. And it's amazing to me because my clinic, despite the mistake, was so informative. Like I felt, but I guess not all clinics are created equally and aren't giving kind of the information. So after your egg retrieval process, you really want to just chill it out for a good 5 to 7 days, and that includes exercise, sex. Just let it all relax down in there. And then after embryo transfers, people get pregnant by living their lives all the time, but it's not a natural pregnancy. So you want to make sure people get kind of go, do I really need to do this needle progesterone in my bum? Like, it hurts so much. Yes, because in a natural pregnancy, follow the advice. In a natural pregnancy, your body produces progesterone once it gets pregnant. But when you just have the embryo put inside you, your body isn't producing the progesterone. So you actually have to manufacture all those hormones.
Yeah.
So you have to follow the protocol and do that. And that also includes for like a good 3 to 5 days, no sex, no, exercise. You can certainly go for a walk, but no jumping around, just to allow that embryo to like get in there and do its business. And then after that, you can pretty much carry on with your life.
It's very science. There's a real science to it that is, I would think if you didn't have a great clinic that you didn't feel connected to, and it sounds like you did, like you always do, you do your research times 100. So you knew everything to ask. Like, I would say, from someone who's uninformed, go in as informed as you can possibly be to ask those questions. On the flip side, for me with endometriosis, which I'm assuming the majority of the people watching know what it is, for those of you that may not, endometriosis is a disease that used to be a reproductive disease. They now call it an autoimmune disease, where your body creates sort of almost like the lining of the uterus migrates and implants in strange places, usually interfering with fertility, fallopian tubes, ovaries, which is why they called it a reproductive disease. But then there's complicated people who have it in their salivary gland, right there, on their liver, in their lungs. So, it is, but knowing, and I think you were going to touch upon this maybe even your last point, knowing what information you need to know and advocating for yourself if something doesn't feel right. And I would assume this would translate into the fertility world as well. But for me, fighting for treatment and knowing about this fucked up disease, get all your facts and don't be afraid to ask for them. And, you're going to put me on Lupron. Great. I've read a lot of things about Lupron. Can you tell me, like, what are the risks? Comment on maybe that just a little bit.
Well, advocating for yourself, is a really big deal, because these fertility clinics, they're so busy. There's a huge demand, and you realize when you go in the morning for your cycle monitoring and you're like, holy shit, there's 100 people here, and there's going to be 300 more. And they're all women about the same age doing the same thing. And so it's going to happen that they lose track. And so you have to advocate for yourself. You're paying them. They're making millions of dollars. So you can be the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. I wish I had questioned that first time, and really be clear on your protocol, ask all the questions, so that if they miss something, or you suspect that maybe somebody's missed something, you can check it out. Yeah. Because the person that's going to be advocating the most for you is you. And you really do have to. It's the science is incredible, and people have amazing success. So it is worth it if you are suffering from infertility. I do think it's worth it to go through it. I really do. And
Yeah.
I have a, you know, I was lucky, and I had a son out of it, and I had him when I was 40. So, and with stage 4 endometriosis. So it is possible. It's absolutely possible, but you got to work. It is work.
Yeah.
And you really have to advocate for yourself.
Absolutely. We just got one last one. Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing the story. You're welcome. Everybody for coming. Anything else from your friend or anything else that's come through?
No, I think those are the biggies. And I think I touched on all the stuff that I, you know, sometimes people ask about what a, you know, day of drugs and a fertility treatment looks like. And it's usually a bit of estrogen. It does. It depends on treatment, but it's usually a little bit estrogen, some progesterone, either up in your wahoo, which ends up falling out, which is why I wanted to, which is why I chose to do the injections. And depending on what other treatments are sort of happening, and I did some Chinese medicine, some acupuncture, and I took pills as well, which I do think was helpful. So.
Yeah, there's a question that just came through, and it says no pressure if it's too much to ask. I really don't think that MJ, like me, we're pretty open books here, and I have a bit of a potty mouth. I tend to swear a little bit, so if it ever ends up on Oprah, we'll have to, you know, put a daisy over my mouth.
Beep, 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 beep.
How is the mental health journey day to day doing a process like this? You seem pretty tough.
Oh, I did find it hard because I wanted it so badly, and because it was accumulative. You know, it was like 3 miscarriages, and then the first one didn't work. So I had some pretty dark days. I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. But I had a really great partner and had really great people in my life, and I really loved being able to go to work. The work I do is very cathartic and awesome.
Very restorative.
Why I really encourage people like to keep their life up, so that it's not all consuming, because it can really engulf you. You know, it's like going through any other. I stayed off all the chat groups because I didn't find it helpful.
I was just going to say
but I know some people do, but I just didn't find it helpful. I found meditation helpful. I found exercise helpful. I found talking about it helpful. I found crying helpful.
Well, that's it. And it's a process that you have to sort of figure out for yourself. I think it's a great question. The mental health journey of anything hard, whether it's overcoming chronic illness, trying to get pregnant, not being able to get pregnant, finding out that you're pregnant when you didn't think you were going to ever be or want to be, having children with special needs, going through a pandemic and not having control of what's going on. Like, there's so much that adds to a rocky mental health journey. And I think finding the things that work for you, knowing who the people are that, as you'll learn when your kid gets into kindergarten, what fills your bucket. So
it's a great expression.
It's a story they learn in kindergarten about how do we fill, you know, without taking out from somebody else's bucket to make your bucket better. But you know, finding out who those people are that make you feel good and that you can turn to in crisis is, I mean, it's key for life. And it changes.
Yeah.
And it does change. You change from the people that you had in your life before you were pregnant to the people that you have when you're pregnant. It's, you know, and then you got a couple of stalwarts that are always there.
Yes.
Anything else from the group? Because I've got sort of a little bit of a PSA that we can plug for. I think next week we're doing fluffy stuff, but the last week actually, which is probably a good end point, not to end on a low note, but there's a lot of grief around this whole process. There's grief with, you know, the life that you lose. There's grief with the life that you thought you were going to have. There's grief with miscarriage. There's grief with having a baby that wasn't supposed to be and not knowing how your life, there's a lot of it. And we are going to talk about grief in week 6. And it doesn't have to pertain to death. It can pertain to the loss of, as we were just saying, the loss of imaginary life that you had predicted for yourself, a loss of a job, a loss of control in this pandemic. But I think that grief plays into your whole story as well. And you are a real survivor of adversity and challenge, and taking those damn lemons and making it into a sweet, sweet lemonade.
Yeah. Well, if anybody out there, and I don't know who's going to listen to this, if anybody's sort of going through it, having a hard time contemplating it, or any stage of this that you're at, I feel you. I really feel you. And I send out all the love and encouragement. And if you want a family, there are ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Whether it's through IVF or adoption or surrogacy, there is hope.
The definition of family is quite broad, and you can stretch it.
That's it.
So
that is it.
Lots of ways to be a mother. Good ending.
Lots of ways to be a mother. There you go.
So thanks everybody for joining us. If you have any further questions that you want to ask offline, I know MJ is open to anything. Feel free to email her or get in touch with her at the studio. For people watching on demand, please feel free to get in touch with either of us. And we hope that you'll spread the word about our Soul Talks. We're coming to the end of our 6-week trial, and I think we're gonna keep going. Pretty much MJ and I will be on the Oprah tour, I would say 2022.
Oprah doesn't know yet, but
we're there on the yacht.
Yeah, we're there.
And if you have ideas that you want to learn more about, we bring in different guests, and we're going to talk about all these tricky little bits that come along with this crazy thing called life. So thank you for joining us, MJ. I will talk to you probably later.
Yeah. Bye, Leslie. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. And scene.
Thank you, everybody.